It's showtime, y'all. So before we get into the body cam footage when I was arrested last year, I beat 2 criminal cases in the state of Georgia in Fulton County. Fulton County is the same county where Young Thug and Donald Trump have their cases. And in the video, what you will see is me requesting for the arresting officer, the supervisor of the arresting officer, to assist me because I was confused on how I was being detained for a failure to appear in the case that had been disposed of. But at that time, I didn't know, and he didn't know, that a second case had been opened without my knowledge. And many of my rights were violated. And I'm going to talk about all of that and how for the past 7 years I had to fight for my freedom. And I'm going to also talk about my 3 different lawsuits that I'm preparing to file in the county against certain public officials for violating.
Like your superior to say, hey, this guy's telling me that the FTA is old. He's already beat the case. The case is closed out. You can look up the case number. Okay. You'll see it's closed. So it shouldn't be a warrant at all.
So what I'll do is, I don't know anything about this because I just got here. Okay. So I'll take a look at the warrant. Okay, and see what's going on. Okay. The way that the process works, all right, is we have an information system. Right. And when we get alerted that somebody has a warrant on that system, what we do is we contact the central system that goes nationwide. All right. Then, but we have representatives. Basically, I'm trying to explain it in a way that like you might understand. So like, then the agency from Cobb, our representative, contacts Fulton and says, hey, we got this individual, we've got him stopped, and we're showing that he has a warrant. Do y'all show that y'all have a warrant on your end? All right. And then Fulton, their person, checks their system, and then they say yes or no. Yes, we're showing an active warrant, or no, we're not showing an active warrant. If they say yes, we're showing an active warrant, all they do is relay that information back to us. You follow me? So that's really the only information that we have to go on. Now I'll take a look at
you can look at the case,
the warrant, the case.
And let them know like, hey, this guy's saying that he already got locked up for the FTA, blowing that out, and he beat the case. So the case is done. There's no FTA, there's no other appearance.
So the case is closed. It's closed. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. What we can do on that is I can run a criminal history on you.
Perfect.
And if that criminal history shows that that case has been finalized, there'll be an outcome from that case. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So
I had to get my money
if
back.
there's an outcome, like if there's a disposition on the case,
it is.
Right, then there wouldn't be a failure to appear for that case because the case is closed.
Exactly.
So if the criminal history shows that it's still an active case, there's not a whole lot that I can do because there ain't no judge that's working, you know, a judge of that level right now. They're at home. Right. It's Saturday. But that's what we'll do now. Okay.
I appreciate it.
And then we'll go from there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Did you hear? So when we go to run his criminal history, it actually does kind of confirm what he's telling us, that this case was no pros, but yet he's got an active warrant for failure to appear. So we're just trying to make sure that it's a valid warrant, because if the case is completed and null pros, I don't understand how there could be a failure to appear warrant for it. Yes, ma'am. Code 4. All right, Mr. White. All right, so this is what we did. Okay, I contacted our GCIC. And they were like, "Hey, tell you what, double confirm. Let's go ahead and just you talk to Fulton." So we called Fulton County. All right. You have 2 different charges on for you. One of them, I think, is the one that you're showing or that you're talking about, and it does. We can see that that's been completed. And then you have another one that's saying that it has not been completed. So you're showing 2 different incidents, I guess.
It's the same case.
I'm just trying to explain to you from our end, okay? if that's the case, we also didn't stop there. We called Fulton County and actually spoke directly to this officer today, just got off the phone with Fulton County, and had them confirm. And they said, yes, that is a brand new warrant. It was just issued earlier this month on the 7th. So, man, like right now, we don't really.
Now, it's interesting. Before making this video, my intentions was to expose the county as being one of the most corrupt counties in the United States of America. And, you know, going through that experience, you know, I met some really honorable people within that county. So it would be dishonorable to blame a whole county. As with anything, there are always bad apples. You know, you have good apples as well. You know, not every clerk is deceptive. Not every judge is deceptive. When you look at, for example, the chief judge in probate court, Fulton County, Miss Kenya Jensen, she's very honorable. Both judges assigned to my case, they were honorable. The first judge, she was very honorable. The second judge, I had to kind of do some things, and I'm gonna talk about that. But for the most part, I have good and bad experiences, so it would be a disservice for me to point the finger at the whole county. So let's get into it. So back in 2017, a warrant was placed for my arrest for simple battery. I had an ex-girlfriend who lied and said I punched her in the face. And at that time, I didn't know that a warrant had been placed for my arrest. I didn't find that out until I had to fly to Canada. I had some business in Canada. When I went through customs, I was flagged. Upon checking my passport, I was told that a warrant for my arrest had been issued in the state of Georgia. And so what ended up happening, I had to be escorted back to the next available flight. When I got back to Georgia, I turned myself in. Went through the process, went through the arraignment. I was offered a plea deal, which was anger management and community service. Keep in mind, I had never been convicted of a crime. I knew I was innocent, and I was prepared to fight. And at that time, I didn't know much about the legal system, but something in me spiritually wanted to fight. I didn't want anything on my record. I wanted to. I didn't want to fold. And so what ended up happening, that first case took about 5 years. And it was set for a jury trial. And what's interesting when you are fighting for your freedom, when anybody that has had the opportunity to deal with the courts, you experience corruption. You experience legal tactics, very deceptive legal tactics. For example, the day of my hearing, I noticed that so you have the judge in the middle, and then you have the defendant, the side of the defendant to the right of the judge, and then you have the side of the plaintiff to the left of the judge. And so in my case, it was me versus the state of Georgia. And it was me versus 4 attorneys. 4 attorneys represent the state of Georgia. And the first red flag was, I noticed that when my case was called and when I had to go and address the situation right before jury selection, going through the whole process of selecting a jury of your peers, and there was an attorney sitting in the seat of the defendant. And so I approached the gentleman and I said, hey, you don't represent me. The state of Georgia doesn't represent me. I represent myself. I need you to move somewhere else. And he apologized, and he was like, oh, we are well aware that you are representing yourself and you don't need legal representation. And I thought that was interesting because I'm like, out of all the seats in the courthouse, why are you sitting in my seat? And so all of these seats in the courthouse, you got this white guy with this fly suit on sitting in my seat. And so, to my knowledge, it was about 30 available seats. You had the jury that was awaiting to be appointed to hear the matter. You had witnesses. You had all type of people in the courthouse. But it was seats. There was a lot of seats available. So I'm like, why is this guy sitting in my seat? So these are the type of games that are played. And you brothers are high smoking. Your awareness is off, and you don't see the finesse. They'll get you every time. And so, the gentleman, he moved. He apologized. I sat down, stood before the judge. We went back and forth, back and forth. The black attorney, she was basically arguing her perspective. I'm basically arguing my perspective. And to make a long story short, in that instance, I was prepared to go to trial. I was prepared to, go through the jury selection, the whole nine. And what ended up happening, the state wasn't prepared. And because they were not prepared, they tried to do a continuance. A motion for continuance is when you are asking the court permission to reschedule. And the judge denied their motion because she saw that they weren't prepared, but I was prepared. And so she didn't want to deprive me of my rights. And she was honorable in that sense. And so what ended up happening, the state dismissed the case. Now, before I go into the second case and everything else, leading up to the jury trial, there was a FTA that was issued in that first case. And so what happened, there was a motion, a hearing for a motion. I had filed a motion. And when I was placed on a schedule, the litigation manager that's responsible for corresponding between the parties and the clerk and putting things on the calendar, they tried to reschedule my hearing at the last minute without giving proper notice. So I think at that time my hearing was at 1:00, and they basically switched the time to about 3 p.m. in that same day without giving proper notice. And so I wasn't there at 3 p.m. And so FTA was issued. And I was pulled over. One day I'm moving around through the city. I'm pulled over. Come to find out there's a warrant for my arrest for not appearing in that hearing. And I was transported from, well, first they took me to city jail, in Atlanta. And I was there for a couple of days, and then I was transported to Fulton County, to Rice Street. When I was in Rice Street, I was starved for 6 out of the 16 days that I was there. Many of you who follow me, I've been vegan over 20 years. I'm very particular on what I eat. I take my health very serious. And so when you first get arrested and you're going through the intake, what they call the intake process, when they're doing the fingerprints, typically you should be there no longer than 24 hours, and then you should be moved, or either you're going to bond out or you're going to be moved to another part of the jail. And so the first couple of days that I was in intake, the type of food that they bring is not going to be food that a vegan would eat. They're bringing out ham sandwiches. And so, I'm letting the deputies know, the sheriff's deputies, hey, I'm vegan. I need something that's going to accommodate my dietary needs. And they refused. I asked for a grievance form. And, by law, when you're under the care of a correctional facility, by law, they're supposed to give you a grievance form. And you're supposed to, file your complaint, and they're supposed to be honorable in honoring your complaint or, acknowledging your complaint. And so I was denied grievance forms on several occasions. Imagine being in a cell with 30 other guys, you know what I'm saying? Guys off the street, you in a cell, one toilet. And so, by the time it got to trial, I felt very confident. I was prepared to, present my case before my peers, and and um and I didn't have any fear. I was ready to go. And so the state wasn't prepared. They tried to ask the court for a continuance. The continuance was denied. The case was dismissed. And guess what happened? A week later, without my knowledge, a case was reopened. And when the case was reopened, it was open using my social. And that social was attached to a fake name, meaning that the name appeared to be similar to my name that was blessed upon me by my mother and father. But there were misspellings in that name. Service wasn't perfected. Due process was violated. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't find out about that second case until a year later, which is the video that you saw me getting arrested. I didn't know anything about it. And so what ended up happening is that when you have a case, and let's say a case takes 10 years, 20 years, once that case is over and finalized, if the statute of limitations have ran, that charge or those charges cannot be brought back again. And when you look at the solicitor's office, for the solicitor's office to retry me after the statute of limitations had ran, after them waiving their rights when they dismissed my case the first time, to do it again, that was dishonorable. That was disgusting. And so, me being locked up again, going through that experience again, having to fight all over again, you can only imagine the type of frustration, the mental anguish that's involved when you are having something lingering over your head. And so in the second case, by that time I was on a different level from a legal standpoint. My knowledge was on a whole nother level, and so I was more than confident that that case would be easy to beat. But the first red flag in that second case, once I got out of jail, once I figured out what was going on, once I figured out um, the deception, I immediately prepared, a motion to dismiss the case. I cited statute of limitations. I challenged jurisdiction. I put all of this in my paperwork. And so I filed my paperwork, and I was trying to communicate with the litigation manager, that had been assigned to the new judge in the second case, because the original judge in the first case, she recused herself. She recused herself. It was a conflict of interest, so she wasn't assigned to the second case. There was a new judge assigned to the case. First case was a black judge, black lady. Second case was a black guy, black judge. So that judicial officer was assigned to the case. I filed my paperwork. And just like any officer of the court, a bar member, an attorney, if you're representing yourself, you should be respected just the same. But in my case, I wasn't being respected. I filed my paperwork. I requested a hearing date. A date hadn't been set. I was getting a runaround. And so I became frustrated. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm filing my motion. Why y'all not setting a hearing to hear my motion? Whether you approve or deny my motion, I'm prepared to go to the Supreme Court of Georgia. And so I'm like, okay, there's some more things that I have to learn. And I end up filing a writ of prohibition in the Supreme Court of Georgia. It's a very, very powerful writ. It's basically you're asking a higher court to take over the case in totality. And so when, of course, they denied my motion. I mean, they denied my writ. I'm sorry. The Supreme Court did. And they can't give you legal advice, but a lot of times when they deny something, they're going to kind of give you, you'll be able to read between the lines to figure out what you need to do. And so, in other words, they're like, hey, you can't come to us because you haven't went through the administrative process. You haven't went through all the steps. You're skipping steps. You're trying to basically circumnavigate the the legal process to bypass certain steps to come to us, because you can't get to them until you've exhausted all your remedy. And then, federal court is something different. But on the state level, the Supreme Court of that state is the highest court. And so I went within, consulted with the Most High, prayed about it. The Most High, told me what I needed to do, which is what I needed to file a complaint. And a lot of brothers are a lot of brothers are railroaded because they don't understand procedure. You don't know that, yeah, you may get your rights violated in jail, but if you just try to go and sue the facility or the principal, which would be the sheriff, like if you're dealing with county, and you go before a court, even though you have all the evidence to support your claim, they're going to dismiss your claim because you didn't go through the administrative steps. You didn't ask for a grievance. You didn't file a grievance. You didn't go through you didn't follow procedure. And so, um, every state should have this, but in Georgia, there's something called the Judicial Qualifications uh, um, Committee. And so they're responsible for holding judges accountable. Any judicial officer that's assigned, that's acting, that's um, appointed to be an officer, the highest officer in that court. Not only do they have to take an oath to protect the Constitution of the state, they also have to take an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States of America. And as a bar member, there's an oath involved with that. But the way that they're really held accountable is through the judicial handbook. It's a rule book. It's a book that teaches that holds judges accountable, that basically holds them to a certain standard, if you will. And so I studied the judicial rule book. I saw 3 to 4 different violations that had been committed by this particular judge. Him not being timely and answering my motion and some other things. And so I put together a legal notice. He was CC'd. I notified his boss, which is the chief judge, in that, which was in state court. And I also notified the director of the Judicial Qualifications Committee of my complaint. And when I filed my complaint, about, I would say, within 2 weeks, guess what happened? I was placed on the calendar. And when I was placed on the calendar, I brought a witness with me just to make sure that things were honorable. You always want to have a witness anytime you are fighting for your freedom. You're battling the state. You always want to have people that are righteous, that are going to make sure that they see what you see. You know, and so I came that day. I was prepared to present my claim, and I went before the judge. I told the sheriff's deputy, hey, let the judge know I want to address the court. I want to do a pretrial. Because I'm not going back and forth I'm not going through the whole jury experience again. I'm just, this needs to be done with right now, today. And so I stood up, I went before the judge. I basically explained what had happened, how my rights were being violated. The judge looked at the state. He said, hey, I'm gonna have to dismiss this case unless you guys have a strong rebuttal. Of course, no argument was presented. And my case was dismissed with prejudice. And so, that was a very powerful experience because, you know, um, being confident, standing up, fighting for your rights, fighting against wickedness. It's you inspire people. And so there were two white ladies. They were um, public defenders. And so they were there, helping other clients. But they were so impressed with my performance that they was clapping like, man, good job, good job. And so, it's yeah. So when you are fighting and fighting and fighting in unfamiliar territory and you come out victorious, yes, it's a beautiful thing. But at the end of the day, what happened should not have happened. I should not have been locked up, which is false imprisonment. I should not have had to go through hoops just to be able to live in peace the way God intended us to live. So um so now let's get into the lawsuits. So the first lawsuit is against the anytime you do in Georgia, every state has it. Like how you have a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act, when you're trying to request information. When you're dealing with federal agencies, every state has something similar. And so in Georgia, we have the Open Records Act. And guess what? I wanted the footage from the courtroom. I wanted to actually see, um, for my records, I wanted to see myself in action, just to see it from a different perspective. And when I requested this footage, the sheriff's office or the custodian of records within the sheriff's office said that it's not possible. That it would be, it would put them at, basically, it would put them at risk for letting the public know where certain secret cameras are hidden. And so, but this is a public venue, so um, I'm entitled to that footage. I gotta have that footage. I want to see. You know, I want to just see. I just wanted to see myself from a different perspective and how that went down for my records. And but anyway, so my lawsuit is against the custodian of records for $25,000. I think that's reasonable. I'm entitled to that. I don't wish for the sister because under Georgia law, when anytime you are denied a lawful request for a record, that custodian of that record, of those records, um, there he or she is held liable for violating that, and of course that's a crime. The other two lawsuits are dealing with false imprisonment, negligence. On the federal side, you got deprivation of rights under color of law. When your right to your due process is violated. The fact that I was in an overcrowded facility. When you're locked up in that condition, at Rice Street is the conditions are deplorable. The doors don't lock. You got to sleep with one eye open. You got brothers out 4 or 5 in the morning walking around. You know what I'm saying? You got to really be on point because anything can happen. And so, not being at peace, knowing that at any given moment you may have to go to war. So, being in a facility that's not held to a certain standard, being starved. I lost 20 pounds of muscle. Um, so calorie intake is important. Nutrition is important, and so you know, um, losing muscle mass. Being starved, being denied. The grievance form. Being going through such a travesty. I got to be paid for that. So my other two lawsuits is against the Solicitor General that's responsible for handling that case, those two criminal cases, and the sheriff of Fulton County. And these may be fine gentlemen, you know what I mean, honorable in the sense that they're for the community, this and that. But when you start violating people's rights, you got to be held accountable. So it's unfortunate But business is business. So the sheriff of Fulton County must be held accountable for the conditions of Rice Street. That's one of the most uh, disgusting facilities in the U.S. I will say that it's terrible. It's terrible. Brothers are getting extorted in there. Brothers getting shanked up. You know what I'm saying? Like you got brothers in there for some light, and it's like you may not come out alive. Over 20, to my knowledge, over 20 people have died in the facility. It's terrible. The conditions are terrible, and so something has to be done about it. Awareness must be spread in regards to the living conditions. Nobody deserves to go through something like that, especially when you're innocent. So, man, this is 15 minutes long, man. We can go all day, but y'all got the gist of, you know, um, what I went through, what I'm working on. I'm gonna keep the people updated every step of the way. Um, and if you don't hear me talk about it, a lot of times what happens when you go through the civil aspect um, of legality, you have to do NDAs and things of that nature when you settle. So, regardless of what happens, I still win, and I'm prepared to fight all the way on the state level, on the federal level, and to anybody that's listening, keep Most High first, because that's how I was able to be victorious. There's a higher intelligence that governs all things, and when you learn through your righteousness how to tap into that higher intelligence, it will guide you and protect you and lead you. And you may not have the knowledge in certain things, but you have the connection to tap into the very thing that has knowledge to all things. And so once you learn how to do that, nothing can stop you. So keep fighting. Don't fold under pressure. Stay relentless. Be diligent. Don't take no for an answer. And study and keep the Most High first. All right, y'all. Until next time.